Hey everybody, this is Robin Jordan, and we are back for Archangel Inc. Live number 40. This is cool. We are four decades worth of material. I don't know if that's true. Four tens worth of material, and it's great to be back. Jordan, how are you tonight?
I am doing great.
Good. So tonight, everybody, we are going to do our best to keep this at around 30 minutes to see if maybe that information content will come through a little easier, keep us focused. And our topic for this evening is writing a book for the first time, 6 things you need to know. So Jordan, you proposed this topic. Is there anything that you wanted to mention as we get started off here?
No, I proposed it because I think it's a common question. Hey, you're going to write a book. You may not, and we talk about this a lot. You don't necessarily know what you don't know. So you don't even know what potentially you need to be aware of.
Right.
And as people that have written our own books, we've had a lot of clients that have written books. We just wanted to share the different things that come up that people have questions about to put in their book, and some stuff that we come up with too, just to make sure you do, and then make sure you also don't forget to do, and also things to avoid too.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really pointed and helpful. Again, I mean, most of the people that come to us, they've already written a manuscript, but we do get inquiries from people who are not yet through with it. And then folks who are reading, the intro email series and so forth. Occasionally they'll follow up with questions, and we want to give people a sense, like you mentioned, Jordan, of help them have fewer unknown unknowns and know what sort of things to focus on and how to get over the hump, because it can be difficult. Some people, the writing part is not a big deal, and it's everything else. But for a number of people, just getting it out there, they have this great vision, this idea, this something in their head, and they want to put it on paper. And so we wanted to provide a handful of suggestions to help provide some guidance along the way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that even if you do already have a manuscript, even if you do already have a book out there, if you're hearing these and listening to us talk about these and you're like, oh man, like I definitely want to include that, you can always go back and edit your book. Sometimes that's not easy and cheap, but it is possible.
Right.
It's easy to re-upload that and kind of fix things. You can also, if it's 1 or 2 things you hear and you're like, okay, I'm going to remember that for next time, maybe as you write your second book, that could be, worthwhile as well. Just wanted to note that even if you're already, it's not, that's what I was going to say. We'll keep it short.
No, great points. I think that, although it is geared toward the first time writer, a lot of these tips will hopefully be useful in, constructing a new manuscript at any stage, whether you've done it before or not. So, all right, opening thoughts. We've been kind of sharing some of those. So the vision here was to provide some key tips for your first manuscript, and it's aimed to help first-timers focus and find success. And the way we've organized it, 3 things to avoid, and then we'll talk about 3 things to make sure to include that you may not have thought about. So first thing on the 3 things to avoid overthinking and or over-editing your first draft. So any thoughts on that, Jordan?
I just think, it's pretty self-explanatory, but when you're thinking about and you're going through and writing your book, you're going to save a lot of time just by writing your first draft and just getting it done. It is very easy for me. I do have to fight this, so this is a good one for me to remember as well as I'm continuing to write. Do not edit as you go. Try as best you can to write your book and just to get it out there. You can always reorganize. You can always edit. You can always change things later. It really can be an impediment to writing progress if. Say you write a chapter at a time and then you're like, okay, I'm going to write a chapter and then I'm going to go back and edit and organize that. It's very easy to want to do that because sometimes starting that next chapter is a lot harder than editing that chapter 1, but do the best you can just to avoid that, get the book done. And of course, think about organization and overall content flow as you're writing, but don't over edit that. Don't feel like you need to make chapter 1 perfect before you move on.
Yeah, that's the biggest tip I would say for first-time writers, for writers in general, particularly ones who, as we've talked about before, you do have a sense of good taste, you have a vision, you have something that you want, you're trying to become a creator because you'd like to convey a message really elegantly, profoundly, meaningfully. Sometimes you get really caught up in trying to make it perfect, trying to have everything laid out in the final form. out of your head, and it's really, really difficult to do that. I would say almost impossible. There might be a handful of writers out there who can sort of master that and have, you know, they're spoken to by their muse, and the first thing that comes out of their pen or, you know, their keyboard is just gold, and they don't have to change a thing. But the reality is most people really do focus on trying to make that too seamless out of the gate. And when you're just getting out of the gate, you just want to get your running legs on, you know. I mean, you've got to crawl before you can walk, and you've got to walk before you can run, and, you know, all of that before you're able to fly and really take off. So that would be my biggest recommendation. Just really give yourself permission to write a lousy first draft. And I've had this experience before where I'm writing something and I'm trying so hard to make it just right that the writing doesn't happen at all. And you can't edit what's not there. So allow yourself, again, to write a mediocre first draft, even a bad first draft, and then you can rearrange, you can tweak, you can edit, you can make it stronger and more aligned with what you're hoping that it'll be. But you need something there to begin with, and that's one of my biggest tips for authors who are just struggling with getting their content out there.
Yeah, I really like that thought, Rob. I really like your note there. Allow yourself to write a bad first draft, because the first draft of your book, it can be terrible, and that's okay. Because like we said, you can move stuff around. You know, it doesn't have to be anywhere near perfect. Just having something to work from, you know, from an editing standpoint, but also just for your own momentum and own like goal progress. Just think, okay, I got my book done. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the next thing. For me, that can be super helpful. And I know that can be useful just to get it done and then go back and move things around, change things.
And it looks like I missed one of my notes here, but one of the ideas that we suggested, and feel free to make use of it or not, crazy idea, don't use the backspace key on round one. I know that I've even had this experience when I'm creating video content where I'll get kind of tripped up, especially in an intro or somewhere along the way, and I want to stop and go from the beginning. And I have to give myself, or rather close out the video and then start again. But sometimes I find that it's easier to just, okay, pause, take a moment, you know, breathe, prepare myself, and then go at it again without even turning the video off, because there's wasted time and energy in doing that. And I think there's also a little bit of loss of momentum when you do that. So again, a bit of a crazy idea, but say, hey, if you notice anything, if you notice any issues and you're inclined to go and switch things around, tell yourself no. You know, hit the return key, start a new paragraph. I mean, you could even repeat the old sentence that maybe you had an error on that you want to rephrase, but do that, because again, you can always pare down what's there already. But if it's all in your head, then you don't have anything to work with.
Yeah, I love that idea, Rob, because I think it parallels well with doing lives. And for me, doing these lives with you has helped me to be a more confident speaker, I believe. Just because you have to be ready to go. You know, there's no undo, there's no record it 10 times. I know when I was doing some of my first videos, it would be over and over again. I'd record and like, whoa, what am I doing? Yeah. And I think potentially the same way with writing that. And now that is a crazy idea to never hit the backspace key. I would have a mess because I'm all over the place with my typing. But I think the idea is sound. Don't feel like you need to just make your sentences and everything flow perfectly, because as long as you have some idea of what you're trying to say, you'll be able to read it going through that second time. Yep. Great points. So moving on, next idea here, avoid writing in a boring or totally unfamiliar topic. I think that's an important one. I mean, the short of it is, if you're trying to write your first book, have a sense of what your purpose is and why you're trying to write on this particular topic. Is it just because you did a keyword search and it looks like that's an underserved category and you think you can make a mark there? Okay, but it's really helpful to have some sense of interest and familiarity with that topic, because otherwise it could be much more of an uphill battle. It can already be an uphill battle in writing your first book, but trying to do it without the benefit of familiarity and interest in your topic magnifies that level of difficulty. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, especially if you're going to be writing more along your own story and trying to work some of your own personal stuff in there, which I think for me, I like that when I'm reading that from an author, and I think that can really empower your writing. So especially if you're writing in a completely unfamiliar topic that you have no knowledge on, it's going to be more difficult. And I think if you do decide to do that, know that going in that it's going to be challenging and prepare for that. or pick something you're familiar with, is really, I think for the most part, just a better idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I mean, again, there are always exceptions to, any rule of thumb, but I think that's a good one. Just find something that is a little bit more comfortable and interesting to you. Elaborating on that, learning details as you go is fine, but you do want to have a sense of the big picture. So again, you may not know, if you're writing about history, you may not know all the details of, a particular military general's, background. But if you have a sense of what they accomplished and what key moments they played a part in, that's important. Have a sense of that big picture, because it's going to make all those other details and bits of disparate information that you find hang onto a framework a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, and I'll share too, Rob, just big picture with that. I don't believe, and this is personal belief, and you can share what you want about this too. I don't believe you have to be like the world's leading expert in a subject to write a book on it. Because I think our own unique personal spin is what makes books exciting, I think. And but with that being said, you'd have to have some familiarity. Like, I'm not going to go write a book about real estate because one, I don't know anything about it, and two, while I'm doing the research, I'm not going to enjoy it. So that's just those are two things, and that's okay. I don't need to write a book about real estate. Maybe someday I will. Maybe next year I'll suddenly get interested in it. But right now, as it stands, I'm not going to do that. Even if I go and see, oh wow, real estate books are really killing it on Amazon. Maybe I should jump into that. Well, maybe not. I don't want to just dive after the money in that case. Right. But if you do have some working familiarity and you are interested in it, then yeah, you're going to have to fill in the gaps somewhere. But yeah.
I agree. I think a lot more effective books have been from people who were sort of self-taught, who learned along the way different things, and then they can still empathize and relate to the experience of somebody just getting into a new topic. All of that said, having some sense of what you're about is helpful, and that leads us to the next note here. I would recommend read at least 2 other books in the genre before you commit to it. And that might seem like an unduly high bar to cross for some, and for others, it might seem like an absurdly low bar to cross. They might think, hey, I've already read a dozen books on this topic. That's why I want to write about it. Other people may say, really, do I have to read, 2 whole books on real estate? Like, isn't it okay if I just spend some time on Zillow? Maybe it is, but I would say just get a sense of what people are about. This has two purposes. I would say one, it helps you ensure that interest threshold, and two, it gives you a little bit of a sensibility of what the expectations are from the audience. Ideally, I would say read 5 or 10 or even 20 books on your topic. They don't have to be the biggest books out there. You don't even necessarily have to read them cover to cover, but getting a good overall sense of what the market is looking for, what the market is responding to, can be really helpful. And that's part of the process of ensuring that you're actually going to be able to follow through with it.
And I just thought of, again, reading at least 2 other books is going to tell you what you don't know. It's going to point you, excuse me, it's going to point you in multiple directions that maybe you hadn't thought of going before. Right. And I think that can be super helpful. So I love that suggestion. Yeah.
Cool. Moving on. Next one is to avoid distractions. Distractions can be very difficult, as we all know. And so the specific things that I mentioned here: create an environment suited to working, and allocate a set time or word limit to maintain daily. I think just that regular practice is going to be helpful in getting over distractions and the difficulty that people experience when crafting their book, especially for the first time, if you're just kind of building that discipline. Is there anything you wanted to say on some of those?
No, that tip, that set time or word limit to maintain, I've taken a different spin on that myself, but I've done this for my last 2 books, and I found it, and it's on along the same vein, but I found it super helpful for me. Okay, I'm starting my book. I got my outline done. I'm ready to go. I mark every time I jump in to write, and it may not be every day. I'm not an everyday consistent kind of person, but when I do go in and write, I mark what my word count is and where I left off, so I can see, okay, I started out the first day I wrote 1,000 words, cool, and then the next day my book, I don't say how many I wrote that day, I just say the book's total 3,000, so I can see that, oh wow, in the past week I bumped my book up to 10,000 words. Like, that's fantastic. And for me, that's like super motivating to see that word count going up toward that first draft. And it really does help me finish it much quicker than it would otherwise. But it's along those same things. Just set a consistent or somewhat consistent schedule or some kind of goal for yourself to meet. It really is super helpful at that point. Once you're ready to go and got the outline done.
Right. And we'll get to outlines in a moment here. But we did cover a couple of different ideas on, how to organize your writing habit, how to get into a productive mind state in a previous live, and I'll include a link to that down below. So there are a number of different approaches, and I appreciate you sharing that, Jordan, because not everybody's going to have the same one. Some people really thrive on that time limit. Hey, I know I've got a half hour, do with it what I may. I'm going to, have that delegated to the writing time, to the writing craft. Other people, hey, I've got to get 500 words out or 1,000 words or something. Or, in your case, there's that momentum building. It's like, hey, I was at 1,000 and, at the end of the week, I'm at 10,000 and that's cool and motivating and helpful in continuing the progress. Whatever it is that works for you, do. I think paying attention to that is going to be helpful. But again, this is all a part of that, avoiding distractions and focusing on what you're trying to accomplish. All right. And now we'll jump to 3 things to remember. And the first one, remember to have a game plan. And let's see. And I'll just include those couple of notes and we can kind of address them all in kind. See last week's live video on outlining, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then another one, research a topic congruent with your goals or interests. So what are your thoughts on that, Jordan?
Well, yeah, first off, definitely if you are at the stage where you're thinking of an idea and you say, hey, I'm really interested in writing a book. Yeah, see our video on outlining if you're ready for that. That's hugely important. But just having a game plan, some kind of idea of what you're doing. I think one of the worst things you could do is just sit down and start writing. And I've seen that advice before. And maybe it could help get you started. But if you don't have a game plan going in, it's going to be very easy to just stop. You could write 1,000 words or 2,000 words, or maybe you don't even know because you're not keeping track. And that just sits in a Google document or a Word document somewhere and is never touched again. Whereas if you have a game plan and you're working it into, and questions to ask in the game plan, why are you doing the book? We talked about this in the outlining. We've talked about this a lot, Rob. Why are you doing it? How does it work into your business? How is it building your platform? All those questions are super important, but then what's your game plan around that? Okay, it's going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to write over this period of time, and you don't have to have it all figured out and all perfect, but the more you can game plan and strategize for getting it done, and it just can make a world of difference.
Right. Yeah, I think this is the opposite or the inverse or something of what we were talking about before in terms of forcing yourself to, just write and not over edit beforehand. I think sometimes people will unfortunately focus so much on their writing and over edit in that part, but not come in with the game plan. I would say if you're struggling, or if there's an area where you want to focus on thinking about it and overthinking it and outlining it or something before really committing and getting too deep, I would say it's in this stage, rather than when you start writing. When you start writing, don't worry about getting all that right. Instead, put all of that energy into the pre-planning stage when you're orienting yourself, figuring out what the heck it is that you're trying to accomplish, and we'll talk about that coming up next here. Remembering your why, but go into it with a game plan. Again, research a topic that is congruent with your goals or interests. So, what is it that you're trying to learn about? Do you have experience with it already? I mean, we've talked previously about authority comes from either from one or both of 2 places. 1, experience, or 2, research. And, do you have all of that experience? Is it all in your head because you've been, in your field, whatever it is, for a decade or multiple decades, and you really just want to impart your wisdom? Okay, that's one type of book. Another type of book is I'm learning, to some extent along with you, or I have a pretty good sense of things, but I need to shore up my insight on some others, so I get my facts straight. So I know what the heck I'm talking about. So I'm able to most effectively deal with these other circumstances that maybe I haven't been exposed to before or dealt with. So, having that game plan, figuring out, okay, what am I actually going to need? Building that outline, what's the audience expectation, and, what are they looking for? Having all of that in this stage can be really, really helpful. So, that's why we say, again, remember to have a game plan and don't go into it willy-nilly and just hope for the best. It may work out, but you're going to increase your chances of it working out if you do have a game plan that you can kind of follow through on.
Yeah, I think breaking it down into those stages is really where it's very impactful, because okay, I'm in the outlining stage, I'm in the research phase. Okay, cool. I'm basically gathering all the tools around me so that when I decide and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to start writing Sunday afternoon, maybe I'm only at like 60% sure what the book is going to look like, or maybe less than that, maybe more. But I'm ready to go. Boom. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to jump into the next stage and finish that first draft. And then, after it's done, then you can go back through and clean up and add some things, maybe see where your research gaps were and fill some things in.
Right. Yeah, no, great points. And it's, again, just helpful to have that sense going in. All right, moving on. Next one is remember your why. And I'll cover the two things that we mentioned underneath that. Actually, three points, subheading, three subheadings. Be honest with yourself about your reasons for writing. Establish what benchmarks would constitute success for you. And in your best case scenario, what happens after your reader finishes the book. So thoughts on those, Jordan?
No, I think all those three questions right there are really super helpful as you're building, to go back on the other one, as you're building your game plan. Right. What do you want the book to look like? What do you want it to do? How do you want it to fit in? And it's hard to know exactly. I think that's a tough question, because some people would respond, and I've responded to, well, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. And that's okay. But I think, having some idea of the answers to these questions, you don't have to have, a completed essay on each one. You don't have to have it perfectly figured out, because honestly, I don't when I go to start this, but I do try to think about this stuff and really figure, try to answer these questions on how it does factor in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you were talking about a moment ago, well, I don't know exactly why I'm writing, what I'm hoping to get out of it, but it's like, okay, well, there's a reason you're writing, and hopefully you can kind of dig away at the surface and figure out what that is. And that can in turn help inform you. And for some people, I mean, we've talked about before, Jordan, after your first book, even though you'd read everything that said, hey, like, have modest expectations, you're like, I think I might be able to retire to Tahiti, off of this one. Yeah. And it's important to be honest with yourself. Like, I mean, I'm told that I probably shouldn't expect too much, but I really think that this has some commercial viability. It's like, okay, fine. That's good. That's good to know. So if you know that that's what you're trying to accomplish, how can you reverse engineer? Are there things that you're overlooking that other commercially successful books have, and you want to incorporate that into it? That's important to figure out. Or if you say, look, I just want to write a book. I just want to know that I can do it. I just want to have it out there. I'd like it to be a good book, but it's not, I don't really care one way or another how it sells. Okay, that's good to know too. And neither of those are better or worse than the other. But having that honesty with yourself about what your expectations are, what your hopes are, and why you're doing this will help inform the rest of the process. So, for example, if you're not really interested in seeing a lot of sales or commercial viability in that sense, okay, well, that means that you don't need to invest quite as much as you would otherwise into the process. Or maybe it means that, there are some gaps in my knowledge. There are some things other books aren't addressing that are sort of in my topic, and but I don't know it, or I don't care to write about it, so I'm not going to, because it's not important to me to pull that segment of the population into this book. But if conversely, hey, it's really important that I become a comprehensive guide, a go-to guide, in my arena, in my field. Well, then you're going to make sure to hit all of the notes that the other high-level authors in your arena are hitting. The knowing what you're trying to accomplish in your book is really going to assist in that crafting stage and make it easier for you to actually follow through on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where that benchmark piece is super important. What does it look like for you?
Right.
And just be real with the likelihood, like you were saying, Rob. In my first book, I was like, I would say, like, I'm not really expecting much, but I mean, my expectations were super pumped up. I had read so many blogs on like so many different things and success people had. And I'm super glad I wrote the book, because it led to other ones, and it's still selling, and that's great. But it's just having realistic expectations there is just, it's just really important, because of course things could do really well and things could take off. but it's just not likely for most books.
Right.
And obviously the better the better you make the book and the more time and effort you put into it, the better chance it's going to have. And we think that's just super important to make a quality product, because at the end of the day, everything depends on the interior and the quality of the book. Hoping for any kind of word of mouth or kind of marketing like that, the book has to be good.
Right.
So it's valuable to do that, but then to ask these questions to just figure out what it looks like for you.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's true. The quality is going to be really important, especially if you want it to have any lasting power and so forth. And then, all right. So moving on, the next and final thing of 6 to remember for first-time authors, remember the details. So we have specifically here front and back matter, things like the call to action, about the author, requests for reviews, etc. And get your design details right. Interior design, digital formatting, etc. Kind of what you were alluding to a moment ago. Those things are going to be important if you're trying to actually reach an audience. If you're trying to actually, have some impact, then paying heed to some of those are going to be helpful. And the other thing too, even if you're not, these are things to look out for and to know, to at least have a level of respect for your own work. You don't have to work with Archangel Inc. We're happy if you elect to. You don't have to work with anyone in particular. There are ways to learn a lot of these skills on your own, but try and do it right as much as you can. Is there anything that you wanted to say on remember the details?
No, I just think it's super important to get those details right as much as you can. And again, just to focus on quality. I've had some outside like offline success with some of my books. And I attribute that just about 100% to just spending the time to edit the book, get a good cover, and do those things that may not seem worthwhile to spend the money on at first, but having a quality book that looks professional, it can make all the difference. And just thinking about, just again, putting your best foot forward and just being proud of your product, it's going to make it easier for you to market. It's going to make it easier for friends and family to help you out, and your audience to get on board. Like, it just makes all of those things easier. My only final note with that, I think when we're thinking about content and getting the details right, always ask yourself how you can serve your audience and the people you're writing for. I have been trying to think about that more often and work that into my own writings and my own content creation. If at the end of the day you're serving people and you're helping people, it's just thinking about those things, your book is going to be better for it. And then the details in there as well. What are ways that you can add things in there that are just going to be more helpful?
Yeah, great North Star to hold on to. Like, how am I serving my audience? What am I doing? I'm asking people to give their time and money. So what am I doing for them? How am I making it worthwhile? And if you're at least on some level keeping that in mind, I think that's going to be to your advantage and their advantage. I will mention as well, and I'll include a link to it, but in terms of things like front and back matter, this is something that sometimes authors don't know to include. Having some sort of call to action. If you have an email list, we really encourage that. We've talked about that before. Providing some sort of incentive and a reminder that people can sign up for that, and hopefully they will do that. Information about you as an author, requests for a review. I will include a link, like I mentioned, in the Archangel Inc. skeleton file, and it's a downloadable template, and you could actually write your book in it, and it has some of these things outlined, and you can customize it to whatever makes sense for you. But that's something, if you're writing a book for the first time, I've seen that in books that I've purchased. Just if you don't have that sort of information there, you could potentially lose people, because again, at the end of them reading it, what are you hoping that they do? Well, in some cases, they're signing up for an email list or looking for other books or products or services that you offer. You've got their attention. They've read all the way through the end. So how are you going to capitalize on that momentum? Thinking about that ahead of time, having a game plan about it can be really helpful. So those are one of the details that I think are important to include. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that question at the end, Rob. I think that's just super important. Once people get to the end of your book, especially if they read all the way through, what do you want them to do? Right. The same question you ask yourself on blog posts, same question you ask yourself when you're posting something on social media. What action do you want people to take? The same goes for a book. What do you want them to do at the end of your book? And just be thinking about that.
Right. And maybe if you're being honest with yourself, you might think, nothing. I want them to
Yeah.
say, hey, that was a good book. I really liked it. And that's fine.
Yep.
But
Yep.
in which case you have a lot more latitude on skipping or avoiding some of these things. But in most cases, you are trying to do something else. Maybe you want them to say, hey, if you like this book, pass it on to a friend. Like, tell your neighbor, your cousin, your coworker, I'd love to, have other people hear my story, or, read this, read these tips, or whatever it is. But yeah, good deal. Moving on, closing thoughts here. Writing a book is a great accomplishment. Congrats on taking the challenge on, and let us know if these tips are helpful. We wish you the very best luck. Anything you wanted to say in closing here, Jordan?
Nope. I think we had some good points there. I enjoyed this discussion. I think this is just super important things to remember. But yeah, if you guys have questions, let us know. We'd be happy to address it on future videos.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you all for tuning in. Anybody who's here live or watching the replay, let us know any questions, any comments. We always appreciate the likes and the subscribes and all of that stuff that tells YouTube rather that we are providing some helpful content. And look forward to seeing you folks in the future. Have a good rest of the night.